Uh, so shut up now. Uh, so this is dynamics. Um, I will give a little, like at the end of class, toward the end of class, I'll give a little uh, tree diagram of how mechanics classes, where this falls in all the mechanics classes. Um, this is an important class for anyone who's doing uh, aerospace engineering or mechanical engineering and some types of civil engineering. Um, Although in other types of civil engineering, you're doing everything you can to avoid dynamics. So I think it's not required for a civil engineering major, but for some parts of civil engineering, it's sort of a key class. Um, I think this is probably of the mechanics classes I teach. This one's probably my favorite one. Um, it's a nice combination of sort of interesting applications of calculus and kind of three-dimensional thinking. Um, and so I'm going to start by going through the syllabus. It's only a 50-minute class, so that's going to take up probably most of the class. And then we'll do a couple little things after that. And then we'll get into, I think, like mathematical engineering material probably Wednesday. Okay, so probably just about everybody here has taken classes at Normandale before, and you know about D2L and stuff. If you have trouble getting onto D2L, let me know after class and I can help you. But when you get onto D2L, um, it looks something like this, and um, we want dynamics. And when you go into the dynamics main page on D2L, there's a little welcome note. This is where the announcements are always going to be. So anytime I post a new, an update to assignments or uh, to see what's assigned for a given class, so the problems are all going to be given in content under materials, but I'll put a note for what problems you should do for what day. Um, anything that's anything that's assigned. So like after today, I'll give an assignment for you in the announcements. It's going to say assignment for Monday 11, no, 1/14. Um, and uh, it's not going to say like a due date or anything. But the assumption is you should try to do it by the next class. I'm not going to collect I'm not going to collect assignments every day. I'll talk more about that as we go through the syllabus. But um, to roughly stay on track, you should try to get whatever is assigned for a day. Try to get it done by the next class. I know sometimes you won't, and whatever. That's fine, but try to stay on track. Um, and then all of the documents that you need for this class are going to be under materials, content. There are a few things already posted, um, including lecture notes from last semester. Um, I'm going to be doing all my lectures on this tablet computer. I know a lot of you have taken classes from me before. Um, so it's going to be recording what I write. You can take notes on what I write the same way you do if I'm writing on the whiteboard. But when I'm done, I'll be able to post something like this. That's a PDF of uh, everything that I wrote in class on whatever day that was in 2018. So if you miss a class, you can go back and look at the notes. And I'm also always recording a video as I go, and that'll be posted to YouTube. I'll give you a link to that. And um, so you'll always have access to notes, always have access to video lectures. I think for some people, most people like taking notes the same way you do normally. Um, but some people prefer to just, since it's all going to be recorded anyways, just sort of watch the lecture, try to absorb it, and then go back and look over the notes that I've posted later. If that works for you, feel free to do that. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the format. It just records everything that I write down. And that's under old lecture notes 2018. And then there'll be a new place that says current lecture notes, and one by one as we go through, I'll post those. These I will change a little bit, but this is the current version of all the problems for the class, um, broken down into topics. So, you go into one of those and there's a bunch of problems for when we get to that subject. And there are solutions posted, not for every problem, for somewhere in the ballpark of half of the problems. So if you get stuck, maybe you can go back and, well, if you get stuck on a problem that I have a solution for, you can use the solution to get unstuck. Or maybe you can, if you're stuck on a different problem, maybe you can find one that's using a similar approach or whatever. So I don't post them all because I don't want you to sort of drift into relying on using the notes, using the solutions before you try to do the problem on your own. But I'm always happy to, at the start of almost every class, I'll ask if there are questions, and I'm always happy to do some, work through some problems in class. And if you come to my office hours, I'm always happy to work through any problems with you. And then the last thing in the table of contents is the course information. That's where the syllabus is. That's the main thing we're doing today. In addition to some other things that'll be important later. So, okay, here's the syllabus. So it gives some contact information at the top. It tells you where my office is. All of my office hours I'm going to do in the tutoring center. So don't come to my office during office hours, but if you ever need to make an appointment with me to talk outside of office hours, like if you can't make it to office hours or whatever, or if you want to talk about something privately, the best way to get a hold of me is email, and we'll just set up a time to meet. So office hours, actually, I need to change. I need to flip flop Mondays and Wednesdays on this. I'll update this document and put it back on D2L. I just found that out yesterday that I have to switch that. But basically, it's like from 2 to 3 Monday through Thursday. But then Mondays, I'm doing an extra hour. Okay. The prerequisites are Physics 1 and Calculus 2. And co-requisite is differential equations. I think the co-requisite of differential equations, I chose that just to match the requirements that they use at the U. But everything you need to know about differential equations, I'll tell you in class. Anything you need to know about, I think Calc 4 is also a little bit of linear algebra. We'll use a lot of linear algebra too, but I'll tell you everything you need to know about that. So it's not a big deal whether you're enrolled in that. It's just to stay sort of on the track that's kind of set. It would be easiest if you were doing that. That's all that means. Let's skip down to the materials. There's no required textbook. If you wanted the textbook that went most closely along with the way I'm going to talk about this class, it would be this one, Beer, Johnson, Cornwell. That's the textbook they use at the U of Minnesota. And I do think it's a good idea for future reference after the class is over mainly to have a textbook. This is a good one. You can get any version number. Really, the only significant thing that tends to change between versions is what numbers, what problems are and stuff. And we're not using this for problems, so it doesn't matter what version you get. So you can save a lot of money a lot of times if you just, look for whatever edition. And then one thing that I love is Sham's outlines. I don't know if you've used those before. The people who've taken classes with me before, like I always recommend them because they cost like $15. They're paperback. They have concise little descriptions of the topics. So they don't tell you too much about the topics, but they have a ton of problems, a lot of them with full solutions. The ones without full solutions have answers. So it's a great way to just get practice as you're getting ready for, refreshing your memory, going on to another class, or if you're trying to get ready for some kind of big exam or something like a professional engineer's exam or something, they're the best for that. So $15, I would just buy one for every science class you take, basically. And they don't, like I said, they don't give you a lot of information. They're not wordy like a textbook is, but I've found like they're pretty good for even learning new topics. I've learned new topics from those before, so I love them. And some of them you can find PDFs for free online, so you might as well check that first. The only things you need are you need a good calculator, a graphing calculator, and if you're in the market for a new calculator, I would get one that does eigenvalues and eigenvectors. You probably haven't done a lot of those yet, but you're sort of at the step in your engineering classes where you're going to start seeing them in just about every class from now on. They're useful in a bunch of different ways that you would never think of as related. It's kind of amazing how often it comes up. But, it's not a big deal, especially with Wolfram Alpha. You can do it on there, but this is something for exams. You can calculate eigenvalues and eigenvectors on your calculator in exams. And then the other thing you need is a 3-ring binder. Well, it can have as many rings as you want, I guess. But it needs to be a binder that holds papers in it. And you need dividers for 3 different sections. A section for course notes, a section for assignments and solutions, and a section for exams. And I'll go into more detail about that. It's going to be just the same way that, like in statics, a lot of you took statics with me last year. It'll be the same kind of idea that I used in statics. The people who took thermo, same idea. And what are we going to cover? Largely this class is just going to be kind of more advanced, more detailed versions of the things you did in Physics 1. So I'm going to start out with a little review of calculus that'll get you used to my notation, the way I do vectors, what you need to know about ordinary differential equations. And then we'll go into kinematics of particles, kinetics of particles. We won't spend too much time on that stuff. And then most of our time is going to be spent on rigid body analysis. So when you did Physics 1, you talked about rigid body analysis when you were dealing with moments and moments of inertia and stuff like that. But most of the time, I think, at least this is how it always is for me, I'm always planning to spend a big chunk of time on that towards the end of the class. And then little by little, you get behind a day, 2 days, whatever. And then by the end, you're just racing to go. So most people's experience is you don't spend as much time on moments and rigid body analysis as your instructor meant for you to. But we'll spend a ton of time on that, more than half the class. And we are mostly going to be doing Newtonian analysis of things. That means Newton's second law and the moment balance equation, rather than using energy methods, although I'll talk a little bit about energy. Um, the way dynamics is usually done is the introductory dynamics class is all Newtonian approach, and then the intermediate dynamics class tends to be more energy approach. They call it Lagrangian method. So most of that will be later. And then at the end, the last thing we'll do is mechanical vibrations, talk about that a little bit, just an introduction to it. The grading for this class, it can be relaxed if it has to be. Like if, I mean, I don't use these strict cutoff lines if if the distribution of grades is lower than I expected or whatever. But for the most part, it's usually going to be 92 and above is an A, 82 to 92 is a B, and then 70, 60. And my grade cutoffs won't be any higher than that. So like if 3/4 of the class got above 92, that many people would get A's. I break down the grade into 70% exams, 15% binder evaluations, and binder evaluations are the only way I'm evaluating your homework too. Like I said, I'll go into more detail about that. And then 15% quizzes. And so now I'm just going to talk about these three parts of the grade in more detail. So first, exams. There are 5 total exams. They're all worth the same amount, even the final. Each one is worth 14%. And this is a little different than probably most classes you take, but each one of those exams is cumulative. So I'm going to try to, with the way I assign problems and stuff, I'm going to try to guide you through staying up to date on the old stuff. But for every exam, you have to be ready for questions on anything that we've covered in the class up to that point. So it's not just going to be like section 1, section 2, whatever. And during the final period is the 5th exam. And exam 5, if it's the lowest score of your 5 exams, then it just counts as exam 5 and that's it, But if it's higher than any of your first 4 exam scores, then it replaces the lowest one of those first 4. So if you do badly on exam 5, it counts as 1 exam. If you do well on it, it counts as 2 and throws out a bad one. So you can think of that as sort of like a mulligan. You can have 1 exam go horrendously, leave crying, go huddle in the corner or whatever, and it doesn't have to affect your grade at all in the end because it can be replaced. That also is how I deal with missing exams if you don't have a good excuse that we've talked about beforehand. So like if you don't make it to exam 3, at the time of exam 3, that just counts as a 0. And you go through the rest of the class with a 0 for exam 3. And then when you take exam 5, your exam 5 score, say you get 85 on it, then you get an 85 for exam 5, and you also get an 85 for the one that's been a 0 up until then. Okay. But if you know you have to miss an exam, come talk to me as soon as you know about it, and I'm sure we can work something out. And this lists when our final is scheduled, so that's when exam 5 is going to be Wednesday, May 15th at 8 a.m. in this room. Any questions about the tests? Okay, the next part of the grade is binder evaluations. So I said you have to get one of these binders. And since there's no required textbook for this class, it's important that you keep some physical thing that you can have on a shelf and go back and teach your, like when you need to remind yourself how to do a kind of problem or about a topic or something, this is going to be most likely your main resource when you come back to it. So it needs to have all your notes, it needs to have all your assignments, all your work, the posted solutions to any of these assignments, and it has to have your quizzes and exams, just so you have it all there in a readable format. It's important that that everything in here is legible. So, okay, let me go through. So there's going to be 3 different sections of your binder, and they need to be separated by dividers. The first one is class notes. And it says you should have good class notes for every meeting. That means they need to be legible. It can't just be like words circled and scribbled arrows over here, whatever. It has to be something you can make sense out of later. If you want, I mean, it's fine with me if you just every class period just copy out my notes and free-hole punch those and put them in your binder. They'll be, I try to keep them legible and readable and whatever. So that's fine with me. They don't have to be your own notes, but you have to have notes for every class meeting. And like I say here, your notes should be easy to follow. They should be legible. If they're not, you should recopy them. And that really, I think, is not a bad idea in general. Read back through your notes, copy them down, write them in a more legible format. You get that second glance at the topics. You pick up some stuff you didn't get the first time through. So yeah, if your notes are really scattered, really hard to read, you'll lose points on the binder evaluation. Assignments and solutions. So every class period, I'll assign some problems, and your solutions to those problems should be in here. And so the notes should be legible. These assignment solutions, you should be putting, well, I don't want to overstate it, but you should be putting a pretty serious effort into making these readable and understandable to somebody reading your notes. So the class notes is for you. Like, I don't have to read your class notes. You just have to be able to make sense out of them later. But your assignment solutions, I need to be able to read. And your figures, especially, you need to put some effort into making those look good. And I would say the main thing you should ask yourself about your figures is it easy to look at those and tell what lines and what vectors are parallel, what lines or vectors are perpendicular, and what lines or vectors are neither of those? Okay. If you do that, your figures probably look like you've done them with an adequate amount of care. If they look like this, like if you have a free body diagram that looks like, you know what I mean? You can't tell if those are parallel or not. You can't tell if those are parallel or not. That's just too sloppy. And partly I care about that because it makes it easier for me to grade. But really the big thing is you're sort of early in the process of halfway through the process of a professional degree, and you need to be able to present information, thoughts in a way that looks professional. And so we're going to practice that here, you know. Um, and then exams and quizzes. It says exams. You should have your quizzes in there too. But once I hand back your exams with the score on it, just punch it, put it in the back in the section for exams. That's all, just so you have it available for future reference. Binders will be turned in to me twice. Monday, February 25th, and Friday, April 19th. Those dates have just been chosen uh, so that I can get them back to you in plenty of time to study for the next quiz or the next exam. That's the idea. So each one of these binder evaluations is going to be worth 7.5% of your grade. Adds up to a total of 15%. Any questions right now about the binders? Okay. And the last part of your grade are the quizzes. So there's a distinction between exams and quizzes. The exams are all going to be problem solving. They're all going to be in a format just like the problems that I assign. The quizzes are going to be short answer questions about what I said in lecture. So um, all I really want you to do is know how to do these problems, but you can't learn how to do the problems if you're not listening to what I say. All this stuff I'm saying is like trying to get you to the point that you can do these problems, you know? So, um, so anyways, every 2 weeks or so, at the end of class, we'll do a 15-minute or so, 10, 15-minute quiz. It's going to be like six to 10 questions, 5 to 10 questions, something like that. Short answer questions, and it's just to make sure that you're going back, rereading the notes, and going through what I say in detail. The way I think about it, um, so there's no textbook. And that cuts out a lot of expected time that, in a lot of classes, there'll be over the course of the semester, say 200 pages of reading assigned. And that takes a long time. And I'm not requiring any reading. Well, let's say the only reading I'm requiring is of the notes that you take in class. So that cuts down 200 typewritten pages down to handwritten pages of I don't know how much, not that much. And the trade-off to me is so I'm trying to distill down 200 small type, small font pages of text into uh, less than 50 classes worth of handwritten notes. That's that's a big reduction in the amount of words that you're responsible for. And I think the trade-off is you should be able to remember what I say pretty well, you know. And I'm going to assign, so at the end of each class, I'm like in my assignment, it's going to say read today's notes. And it's also going to tell you to go back and read those notes a couple other times. And it's going to occasionally ask you to um, write outlines of everything that we've covered so far and just keep going back to them. And uh, so, yeah, I think it's important to remember what I say. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. And I'm going to try to help you stay up with that. But that's what you're responsible for these quizzes. And these quizzes are also cumulative. So to get ready for each quiz, you need to go back and skim through all of the notes up to that point. Yes. Yeah, it's all going to be short answer. There's never going to be like problems on the quizzes. And then that gives the quiz schedule. Again, if you can't make it to any of those, let me know ahead of time and we can probably work something out. The lowest, so there'll be 6 quizzes. The lowest one of those will be dropped. So your quiz score is going to be based on 5 quiz scores. That means since it's 15% of your grade, that means that each one of these quizzes is worth 3%. Okay. And I have 2 little sections here. One's about cheating, just don't cheat. Really, the only way that could come up is copying the work of someone sitting next to you on a quiz or a test. I haven't had problems with that very often in engineering classes. It's more common in like basic physics classes where the people don't want to be there in the least, and whatever. You guys should want to be here, so I haven't had many problems with that. I do want to say this. So your contribution to the learning atmosphere, like it says there, normally I don't have a problem with this. Very rarely have I ever had a problem with this. And I like to keep the atmosphere in class, friendly and light and, joke around or whatever. But um, I have had a time or two where there was a student who was just regularly disruptive, sort of. And I say, as far as like my imagination can only come up with two ways that this could happen. One is just sort of repeated negative comments during the class, like, "Oh, well, now we have to do, now we have to do this." Like, "Oh, thanks for the warning," or whatever. Um, and the second thing is just sort of off-topic comments, off-topic jokes, just pulling the class away from what I'm trying to talk about. Um, that kind of stuff is obviously hugely unprofessional. Um, it's going to if you get in the habit of doing that kind of thing, it's going to hurt you at every level of your education and at every level of your job. And if that becomes a problem with any students, I'll take points off your grade, and I'll feel philosophically justified because it's something you need to stop doing. So, uh, like I said, imagine the way most of your classes go, and there are students who are sort of jokesters and students who do this and whatever. And most of the time, within a couple standard deviations of normal behavior, none of that is a problem to me. But uh, don't be the outlier, I guess. Anybody have any questions about the course structure or the syllabus? Okay. Um, well, I would like you to do something. Take out a sheet of paper and I'd like you to write down three things for me. So So write down three things. Um, the first one is just for my information. So write down, and I guess put your name on it so I can sort of start putting uh, names to faces and backgrounds and whatever. Um, tell me what your intended major is. And if you know, or you can narrow down where you're thinking of transferring to. I know some of you like probably aren't at the stage where you're thinking about that yet, but if you know where you're planning to transfer to, write that down. If you have it narrowed down to two or three, write those down. Um, write down a short summary. I mean, and some of you won't really have anything to say about this, probably. Some of you will have more to say. But write down what you know about, like, if your aunt asked you what dynamics is about, you know? Tell me what dynamics is. What's this class going to talk about? You can do it as a list or a couple sentences or whatever. And then the third thing is list out some engineering applications that you could imagine dynamics being useful for. You can, if you can think of detailed things, tell me that. If you can only think of general things, tell me that. Just think a little bit about what this would be useful for an engineer. Okay. List some engineering applications dynamics would be useful for. So just take a few minutes and write that stuff down, and I guess you can hand it to me when you leave. First one is there's going to be a lot of vector math in this class, and the first assignment is going to be a vector review that's posted in the course information section on D2L, and doing some problems from the vector review. And I just want to point out, like, there's a lot of different notations for vectors. My vector notation is going to be, and I think probably in physics one, the notation you used the most was like, say, negative 5i plus 8j minus 10k. At least all of you saw that notation. In this class, that will be written as negative 5, 8, negative 10 as a column vector. And the reason we're going to use that notation is there's a lot of really useful matrix math you can do with vectors. In our case, the most important is probably rotation matrices. You can multiply. So if you treat a vector as a column matrix like this, you can multiply it by something called a rotation matrix, and that expresses that same vector in a new coordinate system with a new orientation. And we'll use that idea a lot. And yeah, we'll talk about that more as it comes up. And then the second thing I want to say is I want to talk about the expected time commitment. So it's a little surprising, I think, when you think about how varied the universities are across the country, how much uniformity there is in the expected time commitment in different universities. Like if you Google, how much whatever homework expected in a university, a class or whatever, you'll get a bunch of hits. They'll come from a bunch of different universities. One will be Southern Baptist, you know, Eastern Mississippi University, and one will be Harvard and all this stuff. But they're all going to say the same thing about how much time you're expected to spend. They're going to say for every 1 hour of lecture, you're expected to spend 2 to 3 hours outside of class. Okay. So if so, let's say I'm going to be happy on the low side of that 2 to 3 hours, and for an easy number to digest, let's just say it's 3 hours of lecture a week. You should expect to do about 7 hours of work outside of class, an hour a day. Okay. And if you miss a day, you take Sunday off or whatever, expect to make that hour up, that kind of thing. If you take a day, you don't do dynamics homework Tuesday and Thursday, then you're going to have to do 2 hours on Monday and 2 hours on Wednesday or something like that. Okay. So about 7 hours a week outside of class. And I say that, uh, and I want to be clear about this. I'm not saying that because I think the students uh, in my classes are ever lazy. I say it more because I think more than in years past, people are just working their asses off. Um, and people are trying to take as many credits as they can while they're working as many hours as they can. And uh, it's kind of a brutal academic environment that people are in right now. And, you know, if I could do something about this requirement, I would. But there's a certain amount of material you're expected to learn, and that's to require about this commitment. And so if your work schedule and your other school schedule combine to make it impossible for you to do this amount of work, then there's really no way to expect to do well in this class. You know what I mean? Um, so just think about that. So I had a student recently who I loved. It wasn't in an engineering class. It was in a physics class. He was a really pleasant person. He worked hard, um, but he was doing really badly in the class. And uh, I was sort of beating myself up over it, like why is this class not working? You know, like how. And then like towards the end of the class, he came and talked to me, and he's like, yeah, I'm disappointed in how I'm doing. I probably shouldn't have taken three other science classes at the same time I took this. I'm like, yeah, that's a hard schedule. Um, and then he's like, yeah, and then I'm working about 50 hours a week too. And I'm like, what? Like, I mean, it's just giving, it's basically a donation of money to Normandale if you have a schedule like that. And then he's like, well, you know, I think I'll have a lot of time to study for the final though, because I don't have my kids that week, And I'm just like, it's impossible. It just never was going to work. So don't be like that. Uh, so that's all. If you have a concern about your outside commitments, whether it's going to work, come talk to me. Maybe we can work something out, whatever, that'll make it more possible. But expect that amount of time. If it takes less than that, then feel lucky. But this is how much time should be available in your schedule for this one. Okay. So see you Wednesday, and we'll start with engineering.